Benebell Wen, I am so happy to welcome you to Christiana's Psychic Cafe. How are you today?
I'm really good because I'm on Christiana's Psychic Cafe.
Well, thank you so much for that. And I think you're probably really good for another reason too. We're recording this conversation on Tuesday, January 7th, which means that your book is what, 2 days old now?
2 days old. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So, how does that feel? I mean, I know how it feels to be a published author because I am.
Uh-huh.
And I remember that when I saw my first book, which was really slim compared to yours, I cried. I was like so excited. So here you are. This is your first book, and it's a masterpiece. This is not a typical first effort. This would be a lifetime achievement, and you're just starting. So tell me, how does this feel?
It's been really surreal. That's all I can say. Like, for example, when I see this book, it doesn't feel like my book. I don't know if you know, like it's my book, but it just feels like, wow, it's so pretty and big. And did I write that? Wow, you know? And it's a really great feeling. So I mean, it looks like it took a lot of work because it took a lot of work. So it
Well,
was
and thank
many
you.
sleepless nights.
Thank you for saying that because that's really where I wanted to start. And I think I mentioned in the video review that I really appreciated that you did all the work that I didn't want to do. I mean, this is a compendium. You have compiled so much here, and your research is flawless. And I don't know how much you know about sort of the inner workings of the tarot community,
Uh-huh.
but there are a lot of people who are sticklers. And if you don't get the history right, or if you forget a source or whatever, people are going to call you on it.
Oh, I'm sure they'll call me on it. It's really hard to be perfect. Here's the thing with tarot history, it's very difficult to do the research, unless you are a dedicated tarot scholar like Mary Greer or Rachel Pollack, you're going to get something wrong. That's just it comes with the territory. I'm ready for that. I understand, well, I'm not ready for it, but I know it's going to happen and it's okay. And even if you do get the right primary source, I'm not going to pretend that I read Paul Foster Case's book the first time and understood what the heck he was talking about, or Aleister Crowley's book. Like I was just like, you're way smarter than I am. I don't know what that was, and then you have to read it over and over again. Then you have to read other people and what they say about it, and then kind of compare to see if that makes sense. It's not easy. This is a lot harder than the law. It's much harder than the law.
Well, and that's the thing is, and my understanding of how you were humanly able to do this is that, well, you made it through law school, you
Uh-huh.
passed the bar, but now you're telling me this was harder than that.
I thought this was much harder. I really did because a lot of the language, it's not just the language is hard. Forget what they're talking about and the content. The language is difficult. And then the content, I went into a lot of it without any strong background in the Kabbalah and the Kabbalah. And so that made it very difficult. So then I had to stop and then go and do some research and then come back. And so it's been it's not easy.
Wow. So the question I guess I want to start with, this is such a monumental thing. I mean, it feels so good for me to hold it in my hand. I can't imagine what it feels like for you having written it.
Uh-huh.
But every book starts with a seed of an idea somewhere. So I'm hoping you'll take us into the time machine and
Mhm.
take us back to the moment where that seed was first planted, and then tell us sort of how it grew into an 874-page book.
I read a lot. I love to read. And I love to, once for example, of course, I start with the more contemporary sources. I grew up on Eden Gray, Mary Greer, Barbara Moore, Anthony Lewis. He really broke it down and deconstructed tarot for me, right? And then they make these casual mentions of this Aleister Crowley, this Paul Foster case. I'm like, who, right? And then you start going into, then I started reading Christine Payne Towler. She talks a lot about Eliphas Levi, and then I had to look into that. And then when you start reading all of this, I didn't understand it the first few times I read it. So I'm a note taker. You know, I have my notepads open and I do a lot of note taking. And so I started writing and trying to understand the text. And those became my, like, the tarot journal, you know. And so it really started from there. And I had this tarot journal, but it was really more for myself. And then I was actually going for the certification with the TCBA, and that actually helped me organize a lot of the stuff that I had. My tarot journal was a big hot mess. I understood it. It was organized for me, but if you looked at it, you'd be like, I don't know what this is, right? And then the TCBA made me really organize it as I was going through that process. And then I also was teaching tarot, and then I was formulating my own syllabus, and that became the table of contents for the book. And then I fleshed it out from there. So.
Wow. Now, did you imagine, though, I mean, okay, fleshing out the table of contents, which was the syllabus, okay, that all makes sense. But did you imagine at that point that it was going to do this?
No, I think a lot of it is also explaining. So, as you know, tarot is incredibly complex. If you bring up one point, you have to then explain 3 subpoints. And so and then I'm also verbose. I talk a lot, I write a lot. And so that's the reason how it just kind of, you know, stumbled into this large thing.
And one of the things that I find interesting, I had a tough time reviewing this book.
Uh-huh.
It was hard to review, first of all, because it's just great. I mean, okay, there's your review. It's great.
Thank
2
you.
words, fine. Okay, that's not a review. I had a hard time reviewing it because there is so much here. It's like going to be a different book for every person.
I
For
hope
a
so.
beginner, right?
I
Right?
hope so.
Did you have that in mind? The idea that different kinds of tarotists would come to it and take away different things?
But that's the tradition of tarot. Tarot is, first of all, tarot is all about tradition. You start tarot with tradition, and it's not your tradition. You start with somebody else's tradition, you borrow it. And then if you just stay there, you're going to be very limited. You have to really use your intuition and then tailor that tradition towards something that works for you. And that becomes very personal. But then if you talk to people about this approach, they go, oh, you're deviating from tradition too much, right? So then you have that whole issue. It's really, really difficult. But, you know, it does start with tradition, and, you know, there's just so many for me to have to encompass to explain where I'm coming from, you know, because my approach may appear eclectic, but I wouldn't say it's eclectic because there's a very strong core cosmological or philosophical message there. And then I just take from various traditions to explain that core message. I hope that's what people get from it. So
Now, how much of what's in this book is also a part of your regular tarot practice, and how much, like perhaps Kabbalah, did you have to research and put in because it belonged there?
I didn't talk a lot about the Kabbalah, and you'll see that there's really not that much on it. And what you see in there is very basic. It's easy to understand. I can understand that, so anyone can. But when you get into, like, there's a lot that I didn't do with the intersection of tarot and Kabbalah because I'm not qualified to write on that subject. So I'm not going to just regurgitate what I read. If I can't add to that scholarly work, I'm not going to just regurgitate. So I did consciously shy away from it. I knew that would take away from my book because you're omitting a huge core part of the tarot practice. But or people are going to think that. So I'm saying that to cover my butt.
Well done.
Because there's a lawyer in me. But, you know, I'm not qualified to write on that. So for me to do it would be very disingenuous. So
I so appreciate that, and it's such an interesting question, and it happens in many fields, but it happens in tarot too, that I do feel that sometimes people write about things they're not qualified to write about. So I absolutely appreciate your candor, and obviously you were qualified to write about a bunch of stuff.
I do use a lot of it actually. So for example, a lot of it. So I call it the signifier, but the significator, right? That's a huge anchor in what I do. I begin every reading with the significator to sort of bring in the person's energy into the deck. And so it's something that anchors my reading. And so that's a big part of it. The first operation is pretty much anyone who gets a reading from me, I always start with the first operation. And it's just something that really is part of me. I know it's part of, I get it, it's part of the opening of the key. It's not by itself, yada, yada. I know that, okay, people, right? But I've pulled it out of the opening of the key and used this one part because it really resonates with me. The rest of it, I'm not going to sit there and do an opening of the key session with every single person that comes to me for a reading. I would be driven crazy, right? So I do use the first operation, and then I use a lot of the spreads in the book. I listen to what the seeker wants, the client, what they want, and then I sort of tailor a process toward their question. So I do use a lot of the different spreads in there.
Nice, nice. Yeah. And I love the idea of taking these ancient traditions and finding the pieces that work for us and then incorporating them into what we do. I mean, you and I have been on the same page for a long time, so that, I get that. So let me ask you about your journey as a tarotist. Mm-hmm. And clearly, somewhere there, between law school and work and all of that, you have a legitimate tarot practice where you do professional readings and have been doing them for a long time. So when did that start?
How did that start? Actually, so my relationship with tarot has been on and off. It's a long journey, right? So in the beginning, I actually came across it very, very young at the Vestal Public Library, in my upstate New York, at the public library, right? And then many different, that was very superficial though. It was a very fundamental understanding. I could read the cards at a very fundamental level. That's about it. Later on, I revisited in college and really just got interested in the esoteric dimension to tarot. And so it became more spiritual for me. And then law school happened. And I think I really strayed away from spirituality, period, And I reached a point where I was really, really happy on a material level. There's a lot of things in my life that came together really, really well, but something was kind of missing, and I didn't want it to be spirituality or faith or religion, so I still stuck away from that, right? And then a person from my past actually came to me, and I thought they were asking me for legal advice because it started to sound like a legal issue, but it wasn't a legal issue. She wanted me to do a tarot reading to just get a sense of where she was in life because she felt very lost. And then what she was saying about her life was exactly how I felt about my life, but I just didn't say it out loud. And so as I was doing the reading for her, it was a very sort of cathartic experience for me. And I then decided to get back into tarot. And then at that point, that was when I started reading tarot for other people and, joining the ATA and, doing free readings and trying to understand how to do tarot for other people. Because before I was reading court searches by myself and for friends. So then I wanted to read for others and get a sense of how this worked. And then I really found a calling. It was just something that it really, some people are predisposed to becoming what I say interpreters of energy that other people might not be as sensitive to. I don't use the word psychic only because I don't know what the definition of that word is, but I think we are actually on the same page about a lot, I just don't know the definition of the word, so I don't use it. But I think we're talking about the same thing when we talk about it, right? It's just you're more sensitive and more attuned to certain energies that are around people, and you bring in the metaphysical dimension to the physical world. And since you can see the metaphysical dimension, then you can kind of guide people toward better decision making. So I really wanted to do that. That felt really natural to me. And so that's how I became a reader for other people.
That is terrific. And how long ago was that?
2011 is when I started. Yeah, but I was doing it like every morning. I wake up at 6 a.m. and I was doing readings throughout the morning, and at nighttime I was doing readings, and I was really studying tarot at the time. My home office was just stacks and stacks of books and like decks, and just it looked chaotic. So
so how long from the moment that you realized your class syllabus was a table of contents, from that moment to this moment, how long did that take?
Well, I write a lot. I journal, so I mean, it took a lifetime. Like, I'm not saying I lived that long, but I mean, a lot of it sort of predates any of this. I've always had a working journal. I've always, picked and chosen from different texts that I read and put things together. And I'm just really kind of OCD, so I already cite my sources in my journal, and that became sort of the foundation of the book. And then I would say it took taking that, I don't know how much, maybe that was 100,000 words. I think that was about 100,000 words. Taking that core, organizing it through that table of contents, and then adding everything else into the 250,000 word text that you see now, that took 3 years.
Wow. And
But 3 years nonstop. Okay, I'm not saying so it's nonstop for 3 years.
But I mean, 3 years while you were working I mean, your regular day job is fairly monumental.
Yeah, it was really, really hard to do both, and also, manage family obligations at the same time. So it was tough. It was, there's no way around it. I don't even know how to extrapolate on it. It was hard. It was hard.
It's so interesting to hear your process because, of course, as I'm looking through it, and I love the fact that I do sort of a bibliomancy thing with this book where I just sort of open it up and say, okay, this is what I'm going to play with.
Okay.
And it's always something fun. Here, okay, what did I come to? A quick overview of basic essential oils and their uses.
I love essential oils.
It's just fabulous. It is absolutely fabulous. But I digress. The point that I wanted to make is just the comment that I hadn't really gotten just how much this is personally from your heart.
All of it. It's very, very personal.
Yeah.
And so I think that was also why, instead of being, I mean, I was excited, don't get me wrong, but more than excited, you're nervous, because when you put something out there that is very personal and also deviates very far from standard traditions in tarot, because I bring in a lot of Asian culture and Asian theosophy, and that's because I am Asian, in case you haven't noticed. And so if I'm just going to use a strictly Western tradition, it doesn't feel right for me. I'm going to incorporate, the 8 trigrams of the Bagua into the opening of the key rather than the tree of life, because that's where I come from. The tree of life doesn't feel natural for me when I do it, but I understand why you're doing the tree of life. It's about opening the key and understanding the core essence of it. So then for me, that's not going to be the tree of life. For me, that's the 8 trigrams, right? And so that's how I'm going to, integrate the different parts. So I was really nervous how people would feel about what I did with that. But it's very, very personal, because it's exactly how I practice tarot.
Well, and I think, since you mentioned that, you saw on Facebook, I did this little thing at a TV station today. And I realized, as they're taping and I'm shuffling and I was to give the host a reading, essentially. So I'm shuffling, giving the host a reading, and I'm thinking, I wonder how many complaints I'm going to get from people who think that I shuffle wrong or who think that my reading style is in some way disrespectful or inappropriate. And that thought did cross my mind.
It's that.
Trolls are everywhere. What are you going to do? But no one can tell a person that they read tarot wrong.
Agreed, 100%.
And clearly you're showing us what your process is, but not only what your process is, the whole of the material from whence it came.
I felt like I had to explain where it was coming from. Some of it feels like tradition, but then it deviated from tradition. And so because of how I am, I felt like I had to explain why I deviated from tradition, right? So I say, this is the majority view. This is how I understand, based on publicly available records, this is what's done. But this is not how I do it. So I'm going to call my view the minority view, even though it's a minority of one, but hey, whatever, it's my book, I can say whatever, right? And so then I explain how I do it, and I try to give the rationale for what I'm doing. And then I also explain in my book, I don't care how you practice tarot, but you have to know why you do what you do. That's what's important, you know? And I think that's the core of it. As long as you know why you do what you do, who cares how you do it?
That is brilliant. I so agree with that. I teach the same way. And as I'm hearing you say this, I'm thinking you really do think like an attorney.
Oh, yeah, I hope so.
But it's perfect because people look at tarot, and when I say people in this case I'm thinking non-tarot people, the mainstream, whatever, and not the crazies who think that Satan is going to come out of the cards and take us all to breakfast. I'm not talking about them. But just the mainstream, the people you might work with in your office, or the people that I might deal with in my community or whatever, they don't consider that it is such a scholarly thing.
I hope my book can convey that. If you don't know much about tarot and you pick up this book, and if you don't even read the book, that's okay. I don't expect you to. If you pick up this book and you leave with the thought, wow, whoever knows tarot is freaking smart. If they know what's in that book, they're crazy ass smart, because this is hella difficult. If they leave with that thought, I've done my job. I don't care if it delineates from tradition. You get it. I've done my job. This is difficult. There's tradition, built upon tradition, built upon, evolution, how it's evolved over the years. I mean, what we do today is so different from what, say Crowley or Waite was doing. And even Eden Gray, even, Mary Greer, it differs because between Mary Greer and, I would say, my generation, there's actually the tarot grandmasters. I'm not going to name any names, Christiana, but there's this whole, what you guys put out there, we are standing on your shoulders, and we do the work from what you got, where you guys left off. So I think that's really important to show that history and that legacy.
And, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because as I was reading through this book, I felt such a sense of gratitude for
Good.
you for doing exactly that.
I'm glad. That's my purpose. I achieved it. That was a success.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so here's an interesting question. I have my tarot meetup, and of course I'm going to be bringing this. If a tarot teacher or a tarot meetup leader wanted to use this book for a workshop, for a class, now clearly, this is your syllabus, someone could teach this whole book, but it would take some time. If I show up at Panera, where my group meets, and say, okay, look at this book, let's do something with it, what should we do?
Well, actually, what's really funny? One of my sisters was like, "Oh, you are now into tarot? Okay, that's really cool. I want to learn tarot." So I was like, "Well, here you go." And she's like, "No, I don't think so." Right? And then I realized, I've been sort of in my own bubble, working with this book and working with people who are really at a sophisticated level of tarot practice. So I don't even have to explain tarot anymore. And now I'm going back to a position where, okay, somebody doesn't even know how many cards are in the deck. Okay, what am I going to do? So I actually created study guides on my website. And so I have one study guide, which is for beginners. And so you can work with that. And it doesn't go through the whole book. It goes through enough of the book so that when you leave that syllabus, the beginner syllabus, you can read with a very basic proficiency, and you can read for yourself. I don't know if you can read for other people or if you should, but you can definitely read for yourself. And the Celtic cross, and some basics, right? Then the intermediate, I get into signifier, first operation, elemental dignities. I get into a lot of the, the one step above beginner level, And then I have an advanced syllabus. I have 3 different study guides on my website that you can use different parts of the books. So you wouldn't use the entire book in one sitting. It depends on what level of proficiency you're at. If you're already an intermediate reader, then start with the intermediate study guide and work with only certain parts of the book. So
Perfect. That makes sense. And I, in fact, said that in the review, that I didn't think everyone would read it cover to cover. And that's okay.
Yeah, that's totally okay.
So one of the things, of course, that we know about each other is that we both are Waite deck readers.
total Rider-Waite-Smith girl. And I get really, I don't say anything out loud, but I get kind of offended when people sort of talk down on the Rider-Waite-Smith. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like,
Yes.
oh, well, if you're a purist, you're going to use the Tarot de Marseille. Or, well, the Thoth is more powerful than the, if you're into the occult or esoteric tarot or, the continent, I get that. I'm really interested and respectful of all those trading. I don't know, RWS, dude.
And I'm so with you. And then there's the other side, the people who are into more the more modern decks, and they want the beautiful pictures. And okay, it's not the greatest artwork. I get that. I get that. And there are decks that are more beautiful, and I have those decks too, and I love them too. But I mean, for me, this is where it started. And I mean, I know it's not where it started historically, but in my history, in my personal history,
I actually have a story. Do you mind if I
I
share?
know, please, by all means.
Okay, this is actually, it's synchronicities. So I met a tarot reader when I was in college. And this was when I had the Rider-Waite-Smith. I understood the Rider-Waite-Smith deck was the deck, but I didn't like it. I didn't really like the artwork. It was a little two-dimensional. It was kind of, it just didn't resonate with me. That's what I kept saying, And I was playing with other decks that were prettier with softer colors. Also, I think there was some dissonance between me and some of the cards at that time. So like the Tower card, the Devil, etc. I met this tarot reader and we struck up a conversation, and she told me to start with the Rider-Waite-Smith. I said, oh, I have that deck already. I don't really like it. And then what she said, and she didn't pass off on, I mean, she was very, that's the thing with her. She was really patient and understanding. Otherwise, I don't think we would have connected, right? And she said to me, well, if you're looking at these images as just two-dimensional works of art, I see where you're coming from. But this is tarot. And so what you need to see them as the beginning point of a story. Each card tells a story, almost like a fable where, the bird doesn't mean a bird, the lion doesn't mean a lion. And it's a story about someone's life. And if you see it as a starting point for a narrative and the rest of the narrative happens in your mind, then you're only using these pictures as an outline. And then when I went home, I re-examined the Rider-Waite-Smith deck I had home with that new perspective, and I became hooked. I understood where she was coming from. I understood it wasn't about the two-dimensional artwork. If I want art, I'll go to a museum. This isn't about the art. This is more than that. These are starting points of symbology that really helps tap into something greater. I know it's the higher self, the divine, whatever you want to call it, the collective unconscious, the Akashic records. These symbols are tried and true symbols that help you tap into that and bridge into that area. So.
Perfect.
I just had to share that.
No, I love that. That is a fabulous story, and I think you were lucky to meet that teacher at that time.
Yeah.
Because that is the answer. It's not about pretty pictures, and in fact, sometimes I get a little antsy with some of the tarot community because there's such beautiful pictures. Do the pictures tell the story? They don't have to be pretty or not or yes, you know.
I will at least admit that I'm very closed-minded when it comes to that. I mean, I'll admit it. It's closed-minded. It's elitist. I get it. It's cool. I'll take it. But yeah, I do. I don't like it when you dilute the message because you're afraid of something that you're afraid of your own shadow. So you decide not to depict the shadow. I don't understand that idea, really, And if that is really where you're coming from, why are you, I don't know what to say. That's not really where I'm coming from. So.
Well, and the other side to it is, and I think we just started talking about fluffy tarot decks is what just happened.
I didn't say it. You said it.
I did.
That's not what I said. I'm throwing you under the bus. That was not my words. Just clear the air that I didn't say that.
But it's true, and I use this argument too, that whether or not I enjoy or approve of the watered down decks or the fluffy decks or whatever, they might bring people to tarot who wouldn't otherwise have been there. And then it's the question of, well, is that a good thing or not? And really, I do believe it's a good thing. I am much more exoteric than esoteric in my thinking. I do think it's a good thing. But I love being able to have conversations with like-minded people and laugh at it anyway.
I haven't actually come to, I can't say I have a judgment on that. Like, I don't know if it's for better or for worse, you know? Only because I've I've always been taught sugarcoating isn't the right way. There's ways you can package the truth for sure. You know, you can be tactful when you package the truth. And that's actually part of tarot ethics, is how you
Yes.
package the truth. That's
Yes.
very important. But I didn't say sugarcoat, you know, that's very, very different.
Right. It
So,
is. It absolutely is. So let me ask you though, since we're talking about decks, I'm sure you do own more than one deck, yeah?
I maybe 40 something.
Do
So
you?
yeah. And I keep telling myself, okay, no more. And then something comes on the market. I'm like, well, okay, just one more.
It's a fine addiction. It's of all the addictions, it's a relatively healthy one. So for reading, if you're going out to do readings, will it always be with a weight deck or are there other decks you'll use?
Yeah, I use the gold right now. I use the Golden Universal, and it's actually a very superficial reason because it's pretty, you
Mhm,
know. And so
mhm.
it's not for me. It kind of dazzles the client.
Right,
So,
right,
oh,
right.
look at the gilded gold. Oh, it's so pretty. I'm like, yeah, it's really pretty, but it doesn't water it. I mean, it's pretty much a Smith clone. So I
Right.
use the Golden Universal. Actually, another reason is because I don't have a second replica of the Smith. I have the original Smith, and I don't want people touching it.
Sure,
So
sure.
right now, it's just for that reason I'm keeping it sort of in my,
Hmm.
you know, in my little cabinet until I get a Wade Smith clone. Right? Yeah, I'm using the Golden Universal for other people. Sometimes I'll use the Tarot de Marseille or like the Oswald Worth. I'll use the Worth based deck, but no, I pretty much stick with the Golden Universal. And the reason for that, I say, is because I want them to connect to the imagery of the cards, so they see that I'm not making stuff up. You know, if I'm talking about something in, for example, I guess the Nine of Wands, where you have this very defensive position, right? If I'm talking about it, but you don't see the image, it's really hard for you to connect. But if I turn around the card and I show it to you, you get what I'm talking about. So
Right.
that's why I like the Wade Smith. It's about that trinity. It's not just me and the tarot deck. It's me, the other person, and the tarot deck. And there's this trinity that is struck. And the imagery on the Wade Smith is just really, really good for that. The Thoth, not everyone connects to the Thoth, right?
Right.
And the, you know, the Marseille, if you don't have that traditional, you know, study and education in the Marseille deck, you're just, it just looks like 9 sticks going this, you know, right?
And
So,
and to your point, that's a harder thing to show to a client and say, see, I mean,
right. And
it's
if they
harder.
don't have a background in tarot, I'm not going to sit there and start giving them the 101 on elemental dignities and numerology. That's just not going to happen, right?
Right.
And so I like the Wade Smith for that purpose. But if they read tarot themselves, then we can work together. Then I'll use a different deck, so we can start talking about the tarot as well. So.
Right. Right. Absolutely. So let me ask you just a couple of personal questions in the get to know Benebell Wen section of our program. I know you do some astrology. Would you be willing to share with us your sun, your moon, your rising sign? Tell us
Of
what
course.
makes you you.
My ascendant sign is Aquarius, sun sign Libra, and moon sign Leo. So,
Wow. Oh, I like that.
and then I think most of the planets are all in house 9. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't remember which ones, but Mercury is in there, Jupiter's in there. I don't think the moon's in there. I think moon is someplace else. Everything, oh, the sun is in, so my sun sign is in house 9. So all, pretty much everything is just stuck in house 9. So
Gotcha.
I don't know. I know sort of the textbook answer to what that means, but I don't really understand it yet. I'm still waiting to figure that out as I journey through life.
Yeah.
Why there?
You know, I always laugh when I meet an attorney who is a Libra.
Uh-huh. Right.
Are there bunches of them, do you think?
It doesn't come up in everyday conversation
Right?
at the courthouse. We don't, I go, oh, so what's your sun sign? You know, I don't do that. Not at the courthouse, not at the negotiating table. So I don't really know what people's sun signs are, unfortunately. I don't even know their dates of birth, so forget the sun sign, right?
Right.
I have no idea.
Wow.
I have
I
no
just
empirical data to go by.
I have a funny attorney story I will tell you very quickly. When I
Uh,
lived in Connecticut, I was hired every year to entertain at the Young Lawyers section of the Connecticut Bar Association Spring Gala.
mhm,
So it was all attorneys and spouses.
mhm.
And I'd, sit in my corner and do little readings for people, much fun. But the first time I did it, I must have just forgotten the group I was serving because the justice card, of course, came up for every single one of them. And
Yeah.
I, first went, oh, you're very fair minded, legal issues, whatever, whatever. And then I realized every person I read to was either an attorney or married to an attorney. So, of course, the justice card was going to be there.
It's a weird thing, you know. I was sort of experimenting between tarot and feng shui for a while, just trying to figure out if I can, you know, meld the two. And every time I was in my office, like the day job office, and I pulled a tarot card, the justice card kept on coming up, and I was like, I don't understand, whatever, you know. And then it started making sense. Oh wow, really? Is that? Is it that like black and white? Really? There's no fear. What? Come on, this is too literal, right? So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, are you on the Lenormand bandwagon?
No, I'm not on the Lenormand bandwagon. I have Lenormand decks. And actually, the funniest thing is I jumped on the bandwagon because the bandwagon exists. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
okay, why is everyone that I respect Lenormand, Lenormand? So I was like, okay, well, I guess if I'm anybody, I need to be on the Lenormand bandwagon. So I jumped on the bandwagon. I'm like, mm, tarot, thank you. You know, I have my system. It's the tarot. And even this is where I'm closed minded. Even when tarot gets too non-tarot like, I get very like, oh, what are you doing? You know,
Me too.
that awful.
Absolutely. No, I'm the same way. Absolutely,
Bad.
absolutely. So, is there when you work with the cards a lot, you develop a personal relationship with them. And you may have special meanings or special nicknames for the cards that maybe you wouldn't put in the book or necessarily share with anyone, but you have in your mind.
Hmm.
You have any of those?
Nicknames for the
Nick,
cards?
like okay, here's a nickname.
I want to hear yours. Now
Sure.
that you mention it, I'm turning this around because I learned from you, so now I want to hear.
I call Temperance the cosmic bartender.
Oh,
Right?
uh-huh. Yeah, yeah,
Right?
that makes sense.
And I sort of do that just because it's fun and irreverent. It's cute for teaching. But now, if I'm reading for someone and they're looking for a job and they're not sure what job they want and temperance comes up, I will suggest bartending.
Oh, so for Two of Wands, I suppose, I always refer to the Two of Wands as Alexander the Great.
Oh, I love it.
Only because I get that sense from the Two of Wands, you know, where he's a really privileged person. He's in that sort of castle thing, but he's not really happy with the castle environment. He's looking way out there, and he's holding the whole world. So there's a sense of, you know, I've inherited a small kingdom from my father, but I want to transcend the father and go beyond the father and conquer the known world. So I really get that sense from the Two of Wands. So I call it the Alexander the Great card. What else? So the death card, whenever no, not the death, sorry, the devil card, I always think, so this gets really, so I think of the Mara. The Mara are the demons that the Buddha battled with right before he achieved enlightenment. So he was really getting to a place, and that goes with the septenaries, you know, the three septenaries of the major arcana. You know, the third one, it starts with the devil card, right?
Right.
Because you can't begin the path of enlightenment until you face your own devil, which is why I don't really understand why you're watering down the cards. You need to face the devil. You need to face your shadow. And so I always call it the Mara card because it's about your own inner demons and facing your inner demons head on so you can finally begin the journey of self-actualization. Until you face that, there's no way you'll ever, ever reach enlightenment. So
I so agree. I so agree. So have you thought about designing a deck?
no, only because again, it's a whole closed-minded thing. You know, what can I add to? I can add to the body of commenting on tarot decks. I love to comment on what's out there, but I don't think there's a tarot. There's more tarot books in me actually, so I can write more on this subject. I definitely can, but I don't know if there's going to be a tarot deck.
Wow, I cannot wait to see what you do next. That is amazing. So, as far as your tarot reading career, and I have to say this, I don't think I commented on it because I was busy, but I saw rolling in my news feed a little while ago you talking about getting ready for a tarot gig and worrying about losing your voice.
Oh, the marathons. So I've done 3 marathons now. So the marathons are when you start, basically it's a full workday. You know, that's what you guys do, right? So
Right.
it's where you start at maybe 9 o'clock a.m. and you sit there and people come in one after the other and you're just like, hi, how are you? So what is your date of birth? Let me, hi, how are you?
We have another name for that.
Oh, what is it?
The cattle call.
Oh, I don't know. It's not my thing. So I don't know if I'm a professional tarot reader. I don't know, dude.
You don't need to be. I mean, you are. I mean, you are a professional reader, but you don't need to be a full time professional reader, and you don't need to do the cattle call.
So for
You really
the
don't.
ones that I did, there was actually I made sure somebody was there to watch the timing. I never watched the timing because I don't feel so someone would come in and they just kind of like go like this. So I know that my 15 minutes is up and I have to sort of wrap up and go on to the next one. It's really hard because I feel like tarot readings can't is really no it can, but it's really hard to work with that time, those time limits. I don't for me, I don't know. It's just really, really hard for me to do that. So
It's its own skill. It really
yeah,
is.
yeah, that becomes a professional skill.
It
So
is.
yeah, and
Absolutely.
it's not really a spiritual issue. It's really just you have to mix the business aspect with the tarot, and yeah, it's definitely a skill.
And the truth is, in my own practice, I'm still bad at it. I am still really, I mean, not bad at it that I'm going to spend, 40 minutes with a 10-minute reading,
I've heard you say this before. Yes.
but it's hard. It's hard to do that. People got issues.
Right. And sometimes somebody just they have some, no one's the same. And sometimes you just encounter somebody they've got this issue that 15 minutes is not going to cover, but that's what's on the table. It's the 15 minutes is on the table and you're just like, okay, let's do this.
Right. And the one that's hard for me is sometimes, and maybe this happens to you, I don't know. Sometimes when I put the cards out, it's like it's right there. It's coming up off the table and it's really easy to grab onto it. And other times I gotta cogitate on those cards for a couple minutes.
Mm.
Now, are they gonna get 2 minutes less reading because I cogitated for 2 minutes? No. So their reading just took 17 minutes if it was supposed to be a 15-minute reading. And that's just the way it is.
Yeah, that no, that definitely happens to me. You're right. Sometimes the cards just leap like, okay, I know exactly what's going on here, and I can say. And other times, I'm just like, okay, let's see. Okay, so my mind, okay, I'm being pulled toward, this tree in the background with it, and it's like, all right, well, I'll try.
Right, right, absolutely. I thought it was so interesting too when you were getting ready to do the marathon that your concern was for your voice because that is the mark, I think, of a real tarot professional
That
is
was my
your,
experience. The next day, I was like,
oh yeah. Oh yeah, it's a legitimate issue. It really is.
right.
Absolutely. And so I was like, as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh man, not only did she write the book, she did the work. I mean, not just the work of writing the book, but the work in the tarot trenches.
That's actually one of the reasons I went out of my way really hard to get that experience. I didn't think I could write about this unless I had that personal experience, reading for other people, reading for complete strangers, and going through that whole process, doing the different reading in different venues as well, reading for different types of people. I forced myself to do that, to write this book. So,
I have to really point that out and thank you for that because frankly, there are people who are internationally recognized as teachers who haven't done that.
really?
Yeah, it
I didn't know
happens.
that.
It happens.
That I didn't know.
It happens.
Oh,
And
I
I'm not
didn't.
going to say they haven't done that, but I don't know that they have done it for the length of time or to the extent or with the dedication, I don't know that they've ever had vocal problems because of it. Let's put it that way. You know, if you haven't lost your voice at least once reading tarot, you know, you're missing something.
That's so funny that you picked that out. I would have never thought of that detail.
Oh
That's just funny.
gosh.
I would never have thought of that detail.
It is such a it is something that only readers who do vocal readings. I mean, a lot of readers do email readings,
Oh, uh-huh.
which is fine and it's a service and all of that. But the interactive vocal reading, whether it's on the phone or in person or on Skype, if you really do it, you will know that one thing. And if you don't really do it, you will not know.
Oh, that's so funny. I would never have guessed that little detail.
Right.
But it was a legitimate concern. I'm like, I don't know how to solve this problem. People gave great ideas. They didn't like, okay, yeah, I get the tea, I get the cough drops, but I'm still like this at the end. What do you do? What do you do? What is that?
It is chloroseptic.
Okay.
And I always carry some. I don't use it every day. I mean, it's not
Right.
good to use those kind of things all the time. But if you start to get.
Okay. See, I wouldn't have, see, so I'm not a professional. I didn't know there was a thing for that. I was still like trying to
You
make,
would have figured it out. If paying your rent depended on it, you would have figured it out.
okay.
So when we think about a second book, now that your book is 2 days old,
Okay.
I mean, is that in your head? Are you thinking about, gee, in the next book I might want to do this, or what are you thinking?
Yeah, well, let's see, what do I want to do? I think it's probably going to get more into the I Ching. I really want to explore the intersection of tarot and the I Ching.
Is
Um,
there one?
is there an that's what I'm exploring. You know, I've been doing, so I sort of already combine and synthesize the two practices. So when I do tarot readings, a lot of times I'll take out the coins and there's the rice grain method. That's just not going to happen for clients. You know, the rice grain method is where you pull out rice grains from consecrated rice and you count the number of grains and then you divide it by 8 and then you pull another and you count the grains. You do it 3 times. That's not happening. Okay. So the coins, a lot easier. So I use the coins and I'll integrate that into a tarot reading. So I'll cast a hexagram, either the primary hexagram, if there's a secondary hexagram, I cast that. And then we talk about how we compare and contrast. It becomes a comparative game of, well, this is what the I Ching said, here's your tarot reading. And they always, here's the thing, they always resonate. They always make sense with each other. Why is that? I don't know. I have no idea why they always make sense, but they always make sense.
Well, likewise, I mean, if you go to a psychic fair and you're one of those people and you have a reading with every person at the fair, you're going to hear the same message over and over and over again. I mean, truth is truth. Mm-hmm. And if you look at truth with this mirror or this mirror, it's still going to be truth.
Yeah.
And there it is. But I love it that you do I Ching, and I actually have a question, a couple of questions about that, if I may.
Of course.
And I've never heard of the rice method, so I'm happy to hear about that. I've heard of the sticks and the coins. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the coins is what isn't that what we all use here, you know? Mm-hmm. But the thing with the I Ching, does there exist a person who has memorized all the hexagrams and the moving lines? Like with tarot, you go off book. There's no book. With I Ching, you're always with the book. Isn't that right?
It's a different from, okay, I Ching is bibliomancy. What does bibliomancy mean? Bibliomancy means you use a book. So if you're sitting there memorizing the book, I'm really happy for you and you're really cool. But I don't understand, what's the purpose serving? So there's people who don't use the I Ching for divination. They study the I Ching because it's a book of truth, right? Just like, you know, how you can use the tarot for path working, you can use the tarot for study, right? So same thing with the I Ching. People who are doing that, they might incidentally memorize all of the hexagrams because they're studying it in a very sort of esoteric way. that makes sense. But if you're using it for divination and you're, why are you doing that? It doesn't even make any sense. Basically, if you know the 8 trigrams, what you do is you just, so this is the bottom trigram, this is the upper trigram, you look it up in that graph, and then you find the page, and then you read the page. But then there's interpretation. So then you have to sort of interpret, what does this metaphor, what does this poem mean? So there's that aspect to it. But you shouldn't be memorizing it. That's just good for you, but what?
Well, and it's funny, that ability to interpret. The translation I worked with had the poem, and then had the musings of the guy who did the translation, which I happen to like. I liked his style. But from there, you still have to take that and apply it to the person's life.
Yeah.
And it was actually with the I Ching that I discovered that whatever that skill is, that ability to take this text and say, oh, this makes sense because of this and this and this and this, and this is what it's talking about. Everyone, I lived in this big communal household, and we all worked with I Ching, all of us. Mm-hmm. But people would always come to me to do their interpretations. I was like, what, can you not read?
Because you're predisposed to understanding that energy, the metaphysical energy around the physical, and you're more sensitive to that, so you can understand that. That's the only reason why, is because you have that sensitivity. Yeah.
And so when tarot came into my life, then I sort of made that connection, like, oh, that's a thing. Mm-hmm. That's a skill right there, whatever that is.
Right. So actually, I started to translate the I Ching for myself. So I went through the text in Gaudet, the classical Chinese text, and I'm doing my own translation right now. And what I've actually found is that's what I want to put the poems back, but a lot of the poetry that you have right now, it's too literal, so you don't really understand the context of what they're saying. But once you have the poems, understanding the context and the imagery and the story behind every single hexagram, it reminds me of reading descriptions of cards in tarot. So for example, if you open the book and you read, like, if you describe, for example, one of the cards, like, I don't know, the 3 of Swords. If you describe just what you see in the picture to somebody, someone can be like, that's exactly how I feel. Right? Do you know what I'm talking about? Right. And so I Ching is kind of like that. If I can describe the narrative behind the hexagram, you'll immediately understand. Wow. So that's what I'm hoping to do with the text, to turn it into descriptions, kind of like tarot card descriptions, so that people like, people who are working with this energy can read that imagery and go, okay, I can interpret this. So
maybe that's your next book.
I'm hoping. I'm working out the kinks still. It's not going to be anytime soon. So just.
Wow. It is just so wonderful. We've sort of tweeted together, and we've emailed back and forth a few times, and in fact tried to get together for the Psychic Cafe long before this was a reality, and it just didn't work out.
Right.
So, anything else you want people to know about you, about your book? Anything else that we haven't covered? Any questions I should have asked you? Anything else you want people to know?
I hope that the takeaway from the book is I didn't write it in a vacuum, and I could not have written this book in a vacuum. It's based on so many different traditions and so many different people's points of view. And if those points of view, everybody's different perspective on tarot, wasn't available to me, I couldn't have formulated my own approach as I expressed it in the book. So when people say there are too many tarot books out there, I couldn't disagree more. It's because of all those books that were out there that just take this one tradition or take this one and tweak it a little bit to make it their own. And then I read their approach. I read this person's approach. I read, Anthony Lewis's approach, then Barbara Moore, then Eden Gray, and I read Case, and then, even your books. Then I go, okay, I like this. I don't like this. I like this. And I start to form what is my foundation for tarot. And I think that's something that every single tarot reader needs to work through for him or herself. And so that's the takeaway. As big as this book is, I hope it's only your starting. If this is the first book you pick up, I hope it's your starting point. And in that sense, if this, I know my publisher's going to hate me for saying, because they're trying, I mean, it's like what is it? The compendium, you know, it's like the one, I don't even know how to describe it, you know, it's the book to go to, right? That's the marketing for it.
Right.
But if this is the only book you read on tarot and you're a lifetime tarot student, I have failed. I really have. If you think that this is the only book you need to become a tarot practitioner, then I've really failed my job. So I hope that's the takeaway, that you need to read many, many books. And tarot people need to keep on writing books so that there is that body of knowledge that's out there for the next generation. So.
It is, and you know, I just want to say this one more time. I've said it a few times. But the fact that you have assembled all of these different things here in one place, there are, I mean, no exaggeration, 3, 4, maybe 5 things that have been in my head, like, I've really got to research this. Mm-hmm. I don't use it in my practice, but I need to know this, and so I'm going to go through that arduous process of researching it at some point. And now I don't have to.
You know, when I mentor people in tarot, I always make them learn the opening of the key. I actually so that's the one thing, I force it down their throat, because there's many different techniques put into that one thing. And I don't know if you're going to use that in an actual practice setting. But once you know how to do that, I think there's a lot of little things you learn from it. So it's interesting.
That's fabulous. So are you teaching right now? Do you have classes going right now?
I think I'm going I think I might be doing more webinars and things like that for the book in the more classroom settings. Yeah. Right now I teach on a one-to-one basis. I take on mentors on a one-to-one basis, and I don't do the classroom setting only because I feel I have the privilege to make that decision. You know, I can do that. And for me, it's easier for me to work very, very closely with one person. And it actually echoes the tradition, the Chinese tradition of teacher-student, where I really work very in-depth with each student. And I devote a lot of time to every single one of the students. And that's what I prefer.
Wow, wonderful.
But I might be doing more classes, you know, in the future.
Well, I'm thinking, here's my psychic prediction for 2015 for you, Benebell Wen. You are going to be the woman in demand.
Really?
Oh gosh. Oh gosh. Absolutely. Absolutely. This is, I think we all recognize the gift that this is to us. You know, I think the new students will enjoy it, but I think those of us that have been doing this work for so long really get this, you know, and really get how this is not, I mean, this is your legacy, certainly, but this is the legacy of what we've all been doing.
You're going to make the Queen of Swords cry, you know that? That was actually a big concern of mine. I wasn't sure how it was going to be received by the people that I felt like mattered the most. If you don't know tarot and you get this book, you're like, wow, this is a great book. I'm like, I'm really happy because you like my book. But I was really scared what the tarot masters would think, you know, because I'm taking their work, you know, and I'm taking what they do and still putting my spin on it. I was really nervous about that. Am I going to be interpreting their practice correctly? Am I going to be doing justice to what their service is? You know, that was a real concern of mine.
Well, it shows that it was a concern, and you did it in such a way that I think people felt really honored.
It's really hard to be a tarot professional. I don't, it's my calling in the sense that I love it and I have a passion for it, but there's no, I don't think I could, I'm not cut out for it. That's the truth. It takes a real certain like steel spine. More than that, I mean, you have to have more knowledge and more wisdom than everybody out there, and yet you don't get the credit for that knowledge. How do you deal with that? People think I'm smarter than I actually am. So, you know what I mean? Do you know what I'm saying? It's like a complete opposite. Like, oh, well, you're really smart because you do this. I'm like, well, no, not really. So it's really, really hard work. So.
It is hard work. And, and not everyone who's great at it loves doing it. I used to run a psychic fair, which was a great way for me to feed my students into professional work. And, some of them were just fabulous and in fact are still professional readers today. But some of my best readers, I don't think read now at all. Just because you're great at something doesn't mean that you're going to love doing it. And I think for the person who is like really like the full-time professional tarot reader, and that's the difference, you have another full-time job that is assume your primary income and your primary focus. For those of us that have tarot as our primary focus, it takes a very specific personality.
And another problem actually is not, I know this is going to go on forever, but another huge problem is there's no institutional support and no legal support for this profession. And that really bothered me actually as an attorney, because I feel like, I don't want to say I'm not saying civil rights. I'm just saying I don't understand how this profession can have absolutely no legal support whatsoever, no institutional support, no political support. And the laws on the books that govern this profession are so old that, first of all, most of the people don't even know what they are, don't know how to interpret it. They don't even make any sense when you read it. I don't understand why it never caught up. And every single, like the law, what I learned in law school, the law I learned in law school right now is no longer relevant. And it's constantly changing. Why isn't the law there like that for this profession? It just isn't. And so you're working against that mainstream grain. I don't know how you guys do it. And so maybe that's the next, I really want to be an advocate and use my skill set in that sense at some point. No opportunity has come up yet, but I hope a cool opportunity will come up where I can really use that. But that's one thing that's really bothered me fundamentally. I just don't understand it.
When I first started my career in Connecticut, in the area that I was, the person who was really kind of the reigning queen at that time had just won the right to legally read tarot. Prior to that, the law was on the books. And I don't know how she did it. I don't know if she got herself arrested and then fought it or what she did. But she took it to the state legislature and just kind of laid it out there. And then she retired. And so she had really opened the way for me and others as well. But it is an interesting thing. And I think it's true that people who do this work full time have got to be okay with never being 100% in the mainstream.
That's very true. But the thing is, I don't even understand why, because the mainstream is actually very fascinated and very pulled toward tarot. And it's just this thing where it's just shuffles. I don't understand that, It's actually when I have the opportunity to explain tarot to somebody who doesn't know that much about it, everything makes perfect sense to them. Right?
Right.
You must know exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's not woo-woo, it doesn't have to be woo-woo, right?
So what do you think? And we are coming to the end of our time, but this is a great note to go out on. We agree that things are different now than they were 20 years ago when I started, or, when Mary Greer started, or when Eden Gray started. Things are better. Each generation has something that the other did not. Where's it going to be in 20 years? And I don't mean academically, but culturally, legally, how it's perceived. Are we going back into the broom closet, do you think? Are we going out into the mainstream? What's happening?
I think we're going to go, well, I'm not a psychic, but I think it's going to become more mainstream. And the reason for that is because I think once people start understanding, once the laws are coming up to the surface for examination, people are going to realize it's not tenable. It's unconstitutional for starters. And I could get into this, but right? And so then you're going to start understanding there's going to be a new, I guess, a new legal I guess, foundation that will be built at some point. And also, I feel like people are beginning to be more open to it. You know, I see a lot of today's, for example, you were mentioning this actually, and I was the one who was saying I was closed-minded. The angel cards I've learned now, you know, I didn't know about these things before. So the angel oracle cards, whatever else is out there, I think this is helping. And that might be the sort of stepping stone. People will get into the angel oracle cards and say, oh, okay, so, you know, this card is transformation. Okay, what's transformation mean? So maybe we'll get into tarot and it'll be a little bit better. So
there you go.
Yeah, I think it's going to be more mainstream, actually.
Perfect. Perfect. Good prediction. Benebell Wen, I want to thank you so much for taking some time in this your inaugural book week. I'm sure you're busy. I'm sure you're talking to everyone. For those of you,
my honor.
Well, I'm so honored to have you. And for those of you who have not ordered their copy yet, right, here we are, twin copies. Go ahead and get it. Holistic Tarot. Doesn't matter where you are in your tarot journey, there is something in here for you. Benebell, you did a fabulous job with this. Unbelievable, monumental, and hard to believe it's your first book. Can't wait to see what comes next.
Well, thank you. That means a lot coming from you. As you know, I mean, I wouldn't have cited you in so many different places if, you know, you didn't have a very formative effect on how I practice tarot. So
well, I thank you so much for that, and I look forward to talking with you again really soon.
I hope so.
Take care.
You take care too.